Well, hello everybody. My name is Christopher Sealy. I am a sommelier and the wine director at Alo Restaurants, Alo Food Group to be exact, with about 15 years of experience on the floor and with some travel working through the full range of wines and service from the fine dining to the most casual eatery. And this afternoon, or today, whenever you're watching, I'm happy to introduce my friend, David Cacciottolo from LCBO, to introduce the Smart Buy release that is happening today, January 9th, at your local LCBO. David, hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Christopher. I'm very excited to be co-hosting with you today and introducing the viewers to some phenomenal wines from our Smart Buys release. Again, these wines are all available today. They can be purchased at lcbo.com as well as select stores. And just a little bit of background. So Smart Buys really, it's a feature that we do annually, typically around this time, early in January. And these are wines that really over deliver on quality at a great price. And this year we have our release featuring 20 different wines. These are wines that myself and my colleagues have curated that are all under $20. So there's some phenomenal value there.
So thank you very much, and I'm very excited to talk about these wines. It's not often do I get to sit and taste wines, kind of where I started my studies, that are wines for everyone. You get stuck in fine dining and you're looking at the ultimate. So this is a fun exercise for me, and I hope to share some of that excitement with you, our viewers, in the virtual world. So the first wine. I know, David, from our previous conversation, you've got a particular passion for New Zealand. So could you introduce the first wine for us, please?
For sure, I will. So the first wine is we have here our Mount Riley limited edition Sauvignon Blanc. It's the 2019 vintage. And just before we start tasting it, just a reminder to our viewers, if you are planning your own wine tasting, please do so responsibly. So yes, I do have a passion for New Zealand. I think they're making some really interesting wines. And of course, they do Sauvignon Blanc just so well. They are world leaders in production of Sauvignon Blanc. This wine here, so this is from Marlborough. So for those not familiar with New Zealand, it's basically two large islands. This is from the South Island. And of course, being in the Southern Hemisphere, as you move south, it gets generally cooler. So this would be considered a cool climate wine region. And this wine is produced without the use of any oak. It's stainless steel fermented. And again, that's a technique that's used to really preserve the fruit character and the freshness and the vibrancy of the wine. And I think as you taste it, you'll notice that.
Yes, I'm getting a lot of lemon, lime, citrus zestiness, a bit of this sort of nice herbed, green, early spring herbs, if you will, a bit minty and zesty and lime zest. What do you think as well, palate wise?
Yeah, I agree. This is a really elegant wine. There's a lot of finesse here. The main character that I found in terms of fruit is citrus. So there's lots of lemon zest on the nose. There's a really good firm acidity to it, and a really nice finish.
And what I really appreciate about this wine is that some people, at least in our industry, sometimes we have a notion of New Zealand being overripe passion fruit, guava, I would say even fruit loopy, which some people love and some people find a deterrent. I would find that this wine, as you mentioned and reflecting your comments earlier, that it's coming full circle and that there's a lovely salinity and minerality that might remind you of the old world, Loire Valley, Sancerre, and that style of freshness, zestiness, making this a great wine to be paired with salads, whether based on cucumber or fennel, or even if you wanted to get into crudo, raw fish, sushi, if you throw a little coriander, a little spice, not too hot because you want to keep the wine in balance and pleasing and not lose it. But a really fun wine, and I would say well made for the price. We are now
Yeah,
going to
1995, and yeah, for sure. Like for that price point, I think it's really a great example.
great. So we're now going to jump to the another one of the classics of the white wine world, coming from California, and we have Chardonnay coming from Tom Gore, who is not only a winemaker, but second generation grape grower, rather a farmer to be exact. And so this certainly influences the winemaking style, in that it is about the grapes first and then the wine thereafter, which kind of changes the perspective. And what I think and what we might get out of this wine is something in balance and harmony versus the oak Chardonnays that we know, and not until we taste will we find out. A few more details about the wine is that it is sourced from vineyards in North Coast and Central Coast California. This is not the classic Napa Chardonnay. So I'm looking for something a bit different as I move into the wine. North Coast being cooler, certain freshness and vibrancy to the fruit, therefore the wine. And then Central Coast, a bit warmer, probably more in line with Napa in terms of its warmth and heat, what you'll get in the grapes, and then the resulting wine. You use the two like salt and pepper or rosemary and thyme as you're cooking and bringing the wine together to get some interesting results.
Yeah, and this is a wine. Oh, sorry. This is a wine that many of the viewers might recognize the brand. We have Tom Gore Cabernet Sauvignon, which is one of our most popular essentials, and that's available all the time. But this is the white partner to that wine that we bring in from time to time.
And I can see how the name and the brand of Tom Gore can be quite popular and familiar. In this wine, I am getting that oak that some love about California, but also restrained. It is not overly oaky. There's a certain balance of freshness and acidity. What I mean by acidity is that on the palate, you're getting this little sort of salinity and salivation, a lemon tartness, almost hinted or underscored with a touch of vanilla, a bit of caramel, but not too sweet. The wine is still dry, and I would say full-bodied. David?
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, the thing that I like most about this wine is actually the texture. I think that sort of that kiss of oak just rounds it out, and you get this like beautiful mouthfeel. There's a little bit of weight. I also really enjoyed tasting this wine as it warmed up in the glass, and I think all those characters that you mentioned really started to liven up even more so. Oftentimes people will taste or pour white wines that are just too cold. They're right out of the fridge. I often like to take the wine out just 15 minutes before, and then just let it evolve in the glass. Let it warm up and see how the flavors change, and you'll really notice that with this wine.
I always find with white wines, particular, some who love them and some who are unfamiliar, because the nuances in flavor get missed naturally because of temperature. I find also having it in a Chardonnay or Burgundy bowl or whatever glass you have at home, whatever makes you feel comfortable. You meeting the wine halfway is where you'll find the most excitement and fun as you move through and taste. I would say really fun wine, and a lot of Chardonnay, a lot of California sunshine for under $20. Now the next wine,
Great value.
the next wine we have, and I think David will introduce.
Yes. So it's a red wine from Spain. It's the One Gil Yellow Label Monastrell. And that's a wine from Humilia, Spain, which is in southeast Spain. That's a very hot and dry area. And their specialty really is Monastrell. So for those not familiar with Monastrell, it's a very common grape that's grown in the south of Spain, as well as the south of France. And it's known as Mourvedre in France and Mataro in Australia. But typically this grape is blended into other reds. It's blended with other reds. The unique thing about this region is they actually produce and are well known for producing very high quality single varietal monastrells. It's one of the few regions where you'll find that. Many of the producers will blend in up to 20% other grapes, so things like Cabernet and Syrah, into their Monastrell. This one that we're tasting is actually 100% Monastrell. So it's quite an interesting thing. Maybe many people have not tasted a Monastrell, and this is at $14.95. This is a great opportunity to try one.
I think part of the adventure and beauty of this wine, not only, yes, under $20, but the nature and the quality of the fruit. So often we associate Spanish wines, European wines, and David and I, we've had lengthy discussions about old world and what does that mean? Is it
Yeah.
all about being dry and bitter and tannic and I have to have food with it? Whereas it's not always the case. And certain varietals, such as Monastrell, which typically in a blend gives some fruit and the energy to a blend, you really see it coming through in this wine with a lot of primary red berry fruits, a bit candied, almost like red licorice or Twizzlers or nibs. Really fun wine that I think you could have with all sorts of things at the table, be it a tagine with lamb or vegetables, Mediterranean spiced or herbed rest al hanout or something really from the Middle East. But David, I know we talked about old world meets new world. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think the old perceptions are, very linear. So old world being wines from Europe and very more tannic and acid and really built around food. That is true to some extent. And then new world is all about like sort of like bigger alcohol, darker wines, big fruit, round flavors, a little bit of sweetness. That's sort of like an old perception. A lot of that is changing. So you're getting sort of like new world meets old world. And I think this wine is probably a good example of that. It is definitely old world, but it's got some little bit of new world flair. And that's probably how I would describe it.
There we go. And so many of the winemakers here, especially Juan Gil, it is the grandson, if I'm correct, or the great grandson, who's at the head of winemaking, who now the new generation of winemakers, old and new, are traveling. They're connected, especially in this virtual world that we live in. People are talking to each other and taking new ideas, blending tradition and history. And so for 14.95, I think this is a great wine to sort of start your adventure in that fruit-driven path, if that's your style, into the old world, if you're really just into Australia or Australia or California or elsewise. Don't be afraid of the old world. There's always something to learn, just like your grandmother would say, perhaps.
For sure.
So now we jump into, again, talking about New World, a perfect segue because often Shiraz from this producer, Jip Jip Rocks, out of South Australia, Pathway to be exact, often part of the GSM blend that David had mentioned. Here we are, South Australia, still warm, but cool. We're literally not far from the South Pacific, South Indian Ocean, looking towards Antarctic. So you have, as we know, Australia known for its fruit, big, jammy, rich Shirazes, Cabernet. We've got, again, coming full circle, a producer here making some really interesting wines in what I would say, having traveled there, a beautiful part of Australia in terms of precision, in terms of quality, in terms of excitement, and again, an evolution in what we thought and used to know for Shiraz being jammy and rich, but a wine here, I think, that sort of expresses some balance, nice acidity, and some character. And David,
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say that, I've talked to a lot of customers and they say that, they used to like Shiraz and they don't anymore. Oftentimes they haven't actually tasted modern Shiraz. Really, they're remembering Shiraz from 15 years ago and they remember that big jammy fruit. And that's what was popular then. But there's been quite a change and there's a lot more finesse, a lot more elegance. These wines are just styled differently. They're like, they're great on the dinner table. And this is probably, I think, an example of one of these newer style Shiraz.
yeah, and I think really to contrast the two, because they are typically blending partners, but here alone, there is a certain sort of deep, darker or black cherry, and again, not jammed and not too heavy. There's a certain joie de vivre. So those who love Shiraz and know Shiraz, don't be afraid. There is still that sort of smoky, black olive, bacon, hickory tone, but a nice sort of core of plum, but always sort of framed by some acidity and structure. And for guests out there who when you're with a sommelier or a wine buyer, talk about acid, you might be like, what is acid? That doesn't sound good. Well, acid is sort of like ironing the collar of your shirt or the pleat in your pants. It kind of keeps things in line, gives a little bit of edge and feel so that, when you're moving through the room or tasting the wine, there's always something to kind of keep you straight and in line. And then all the fruit, the weight, the energy, the feel is coming through as you taste the wine. And having grilled steak or grilled meats, maybe roasted veg, if you will, from the mushrooms, to burgers, if you will, makes this a fun wine to have at the dinner table, or even just to relax with, watching Netflix with your friends or yourself.
That was a great
Really,
analogy. I love that in terms of your thoughts on acidity and how that just keeps things straight. That's great.
yeah, it's a nicer way to get people into wine because often, Som talk and LCBO wine buyer talk, we're coming from the same direction, but how does that translate to the buyer and the drinker if they want to go home and sort of enjoy these wines? It's like, let's give them something to relate to. Really, the two wines, the two Shiraz, if we can stay here for a moment, the two wines, the Jip Jip Rock Shiraz and the Quanquil, it's like going to the store and trying on two pairs of shoes that you really like. Put one on the other one foot, put it on the other, see how it feels. And you know what? You might like them both. So you know what? For under $20, I think a good bet that you'll enjoy them at home, doing your own comparative tasting the way that David and I are doing. So, which leads us to the next series of wines, which are really fun. And David, if you could introduce the first one, I'll talk about the
For
second.
sure. So for the first Cabernet that we're tasting, it's Trapiche Medalla Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's the 2016 vintage, pardon me, and it's priced at $17. So this is from Trapiche. This is one of Argentina's oldest and largest producers of premium wines. They're located in the Mendoza area, which is really at the foothills of the Andes Mountains. This is a very special wine because it's part of our $17 solution program. So those are wines that are released with each edition of Food and Drink magazine. And these are wines where our buyers will negotiate the price down to $17. So this is a fantastic value. This is a wine that would normally be valued at about $19.95, but for this release we have it for $17. So there's some phenomenal value there.
I really love this wine for what it is and the price. One, we've talked about the fact that it's 2016. It is 4 years old. And some people will say, oh, 4 years old, that's kind of young. But think about the last time we had an old or aged Cabernet Sauvignon from a New World producer. We often associate aging with Bordeaux in Old World. But with this wine, I think it is beautiful as it is, as it's evolving, and you can find some tertiary notes. There is that blue fruit. There is that sort of ripeness and energy that we want to hold on to that makes it so pleasurable with food. But there is some tertiary meaning that it's moving towards herbal notes, maybe a bit of bell pepper, a little bit of jalapeno. It is like you getting older and wiser, moving towards a more sort of complex stage in life, if you will. I mean, the human analogy is so great with wine because I think wine progresses the way we live and understand the world around us. The fact that Argentina, I'm not sure if I recall David mentioning, known for Malbec, big, heavy, beautiful wines. Cabernet is a little secret, the insider's scoop of well-balanced and lovely wines coming from this region of Mendoza at the foot of the Andes, that if you love Bordeaux and you sort of captivated or enchanted by that old world feel, I think jumping into, for $17, something from Argentina with a little bit of age and the winemaking here, I think you'd be really pleased with what's in the glass.
For sure. I think this wine is drinking beautifully, and the fact that it is starting to show just a little bit of age, I think adds sort of some layers of complexity and just notes that you wouldn't have got even a year ago on this wine. So definitely a little gem that I'm very proud to have released.
And so part of our conversation was that we'd have a little ping pong, and we have a second Cabernet for us to sort of compare and contrast, because not all Cabernets are the same. They are unique and different. So this comparison is the same, but but different. We've got out of California the Long Barn Cabernet Sauvignon. 2017 is the vintage at 1695. Um, a Napa Valley based winery, though the vineyards and the grapes sourced for this wine are coming from California overall. And I just want to highlight that difference because for what they've been able to do here in sort of putting a wine together is quite fantastic for under $20. The winemaker, Italian origin and heritage, coming from northern Italy, is bringing a bit of that old world sensibility to a new world wine region. I know we talked about that with our previous wines in the session, and I find that coming through a bit on the palate. And I think David, you had some interesting things to say about that old world feeling. I'm not sure if you find any.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is, first of all, this is phenomenal value for 16.95. Rarely do we have California Cab at this price in vintages at this quality. So this is definitely a little gem that you won't find throughout the year. But yeah, in terms of the, we were trying to pick out whether or not we can pick up that European sensibility from the Italian winemaker, and I think there's a little of that. I mean, it's definitely California. There's a lot of fruit. This is a very round, fruit-driven wine, but I really like the fact that it's not an over-extracted wine. Like this probably hasn't sat on the skins for an excessive amount of time. It's got an absolutely beautiful color. There's good balance. Even though it is very fruit forward, there is enough acidity there to balance all that out. And for the price, I thought this was fantastic.
And going back to what David was saying when he's mentioning sitting on the skins, for those of our viewers who are unfamiliar with winemaking, sitting on the skins means that maceration, when you, almost like the way you would steep a tea bag or marinate some meat or veg, the more you soak in the seasoning and the spice, the richer and heavier the wines can be. And often California Cabernet or Napa Valley Cabernet or any wine or from around the world, when it soaks in a lot of that sort of grape juice and skin contact, becomes really quite tannic, almost ripe and sugary and heavy. What David is hinting at is that there is a restraint, almost like wearing just the right amount of perfume, or putting the right amount of like gel in your hair. Well, we have no hair, so that doesn't not a consideration for us. But I think you get what I mean, in that there is this fruit. I found a bit of vanilla and rum and raisin. Wouldn't say too plummy, too jammy, just enough to kind of make it, wow, this is a lot of wine for under $20, but enough acidity, that salivation, that sort of tartness that kind of keeps the wine in check. And impressive for what I see in the world of wine at the high end. There is that super luxurious smooth wines, and then here at I never say it low end, because I don't really think that exists, because there's a lot of gems to be found in the wine world, and we've tasted 6 of them with you today, and for you to find at your local LCBO. But this is pretty cool, and we've decanted these wines. There's something to be said about, yes, we pull the cork right away, but I know David and I, we've had these wines open and decanted for a moment as we sit and study, doing our wine nerd thing, if you will. But there's no reason why you can't do the same thing at home. Buy 2 bottles, try it out with your partners and your friends in your bubble at home, naturally, based on COVID. But I think you'd be pretty surprised and happy with what you might discover in a wine at this price point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think one of the things that I really enjoy with wine is actually just seeing how they evolve, not only over time, but from opening the bottle to the first glass to the very last glass. And it's amazing sometimes how these wines will evolve, and even some of these wines under $20, will evolve over time in the glass, and it makes it for really interesting tasting.
And there we have it. I'd like to thank all of you for hanging in with us as we kind of geek out in a fun way, I would like to say, on a Saturday, as we move through these 6 wines. Again, these are just 6 wines. There are many more of the smart buys to be hold and find and search out in your local LCBO, and maybe I'll see you in the aisles in your neighborhood. And David, I'm sure you have a few closing words for our friends out there in the virtual world.
For sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Christopher. I'm really glad that we had the chance to do this. This was a lot of fun. And then for the viewers, if there are any of these wines that piqued your interest, or any of the 20 in the release today, you can get them by logging on to lcbo.com, placing an order, or in select stores.
Thank you very much, everyone. Be safe, drink safely, and enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.